Back in 2021, I played Cars Race-O-Rama for the first time on PlayStation Now, and I come to the conclusion that it was the best Cars game. I haven't played it since then until a few days ago, so let's see if my original opinion from 5 years ago holds up. Is it the best Cars game? Is it only the best of the THQ trilogy? Or is it secretly a bad game this whole time? Race-O-Rama was released in 2009 by THQ, and it was released on the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Wii, DS, and PSP. The PS2 and Wii versions are just the HD versions, but everything is downscaled for their hardware. The DS and PSP versions are their own separate games that I'll talk about later. Race-O-Rama never got a PC version, unfortunately, so I just emulated the 360 version for this video. The 360 and PS3 versions are identical to each other, but I heard that the 360 version has slightly better performance. And Xenia is a more stable emulator than RPCS3, even with my monster PC. The story starts a little bit after Meta National. Lightning has built his racing headquarters, so he built the Doc Hudson Racing Academy to go with it. Our first race is a simple tutorial race. The gameplay of this game is pretty similar to Cars 1 and Meta National, with a few small changes. Power sliding has been removed, placed with the drifting mechanic. However, drifting in this game is nothing like how it is in something like Mario Kart or Cars 2. It's basically just power sliding, but with this diagram at the top to show how much you've turned and how many points you'll get for that. Boosting has also undergone a slight change. In Race-O-Rama, you will not upgrade your boost meter. You have this big meter at the bottom and it will stay that way for your entire playthrough. Once you deplete your boost meter, it'll come back on its own, just like in the other two games, but you can speed up its recharge by drifting. And by doing this you can start boosting and then start drifting to theoretically never run out of boost.
Hey, Editing Zemshia here. Now that I'm looking through this footage of someone else being a lot better at Race-O-Rama than I am, maybe I'm just bad at the game? Because I say that drifting is basically just power sliding, but what this person's doing, I don't think you can do that with power sliding. I think, for the most part, I kinda have, the way I talk about drifting, I've got that down, but it is still its own mechanic you can do your own very, very unique stuff with, so yeah, my bad, I guess I kinda got that part wrong.
Personally, I'm cool with these changes. Drifting is basically the same as power sliding, so I don't really care which one I have. And I like having a full boost meter when starting the game, so I don't have to keep leveling it up every time I start a new game. Replenishing boost via drifting is also a good way to incentivize use of the drift mechanic. After the first race, we see some students start cheating and bumping other cars off the road. Chick Hickson comes onto the track and declares that he'll win the Race-O-Rama series, shut down the Doc Hudson Racing Academy, and take over Radiator Springs. He's also got 3 new friends. A rich girl named Candace, an off-road racer named El Machismo, and a street racer named Stinger. So we gotta beat his friends and then Chick. Honestly, Chick was an interesting enough villain in the first Cars movie, being the archetypal dark reflection of the protagonist, and who Lightning could have become if he never learned to be selfless. He was pretty much the same in the original game, but he's so much better in this game because he goes into full supervillain mode. Shutting down Doc's academy and getting students to go to his academy is one thing, but then he says,
"Me and some of my friends are here to win the Race-O-Rama series and shut down your pathetic Doc Hudson Racing Academy. Then every car in the world will want to come to my school, the Chick Hicks Racing Academy, where they will learn from the best. Me!" Oh, and Lightning, when we're through, your gap-toothed buddy Mater will have to tow you out of town in shame, because Radiator Springs will be mine. All mine!
Dude, it's incredible. Once you get through the first racing cutscene, you unlock an event called Mac Track Challenge. This event teaches you how to drift, but at the end, it also teaches you QTEs. Controller prompts appear on the screen, do what it says before time runs out. It's kinda cool, but QTEs are never used anywhere besides the minigames. Personally, I really do not care. QTEs are kinda cool because I feel satisfying, but again, they only really show up in 3 or 4 minigames. There are 2 more races, and then you unlock a new hub world, Radiator Springs. Without a doubt, this is the best version of Radiator Springs across the entire trilogy. In the first 2 games, Radiator Springs was one hub world, with Ornament Valley and Tailfin Pass being the 2 other hub worlds that needed to be accessed via a loading screen. Now, Hell no, you can just drive on from the Wheelwell Motel and Telfin Pass through the Radiator Springs town and up to the desert and Ornament Valley without a loading screen in sight. It's magnificent. Plus, remember how Mana National made a bunch of weird changes to the map and made the world smaller? Yeah, those changes have been fixed. The world map is back to how it was in Cars 1. Personally, I'm a bit torn on this. On the one hand, I do prefer the world map from the first Cars game. Again, it's much bigger than Mana Nationals. On the other hand, and I know this is gonna make me sound like a huge nerd, this does muddy up the Cars canon a bit. Simply put, you can't change the entire layout of the world in the span of a few years unless you have some sort of massive event or threat that just doesn't exist. You could argue that Mana National is non-canonical, but that can be because the Racing Academy is also in this game. It's weird to explain, but in my opinion, Mana National is in a weird state where the broad strokes of the events did happen. A bunch of cars from around the world come to race in Lightning Builders Racing headquarters, but the events don't play out exactly as we saw them. It's also a missed opportunity to include the best parts of Cars 1's overworld with the best parts of Mana Nationals. In Ornament Valley, there were originally a bunch of train tracks, but in Mana National, it was replaced with a massive airport. I know I moaned and groaned about it in my review of that game, but truth be told, I liked that airport and thought it was cool. It added some more to Ornament Valley beyond what it was previously, a massive desert with the Rust Bucket Stadium in the middle. There were also 2 separate caves in Ornament Valley, and added a lot more to the massive barren desert. In Telfin Pass, they'd of course have to keep the waterfall in mind for the original game, but they could also bring in the lumberjack houses and rock falling section from Mana National. It'd be awesome. However, I do understand that this would probably be pretty unlikely to ever actually happen. It was probably a lot simpler to port the original Cars 1 map over than to stitch together parts of the original map with the Mana National map. Plus, the fact that they made 4 other entirely original maps in this game does not help my case. Radiator Springs is where you'll be spending most of your time, as you'll be coming back here for more events in between the other world maps. And as such, this place has the most events, as well as the most minigames and extra content. Of course, there's some normal road races in Radiator Springs, and they're good fun. But one thing I've neglected to mention so far are the stars with images of spark plugs on them. There are 3 in every story event, and grabbing all of them isn't hard at most of the events. Out of all 69 or so of them, only 4 or 5 should give you any trouble. Once you grab all 3 in a given event, you unlock new parts for Lightning. In Doc's garage, you can give Lightning a different hood, side skirt, bumper, and spoiler. Honestly, this seems really cool. It must have been great for kids back then who wanted their own version of Lightning McQueen. Personally though, I didn't really use this feature. I like Lightning just the way he was. And while I'm at it, might as well mention that you can still change Lightning's paint job and tire just like Mana National. Again, it's cool to see, I'm glad it's here, I just didn't make much use of it personally. There are also a load of other optional events, most of which are in Radiator Springs. First are the point-to-point races. These are races where you go from point A to point B and you only have 1 lap. The first Cars game had a race like this as well, but now they've made 5 of them. Personally, I think it's cool how you explore pretty much the entire world map in a single race. Even better for Radiator Springs since you go all the way from Telfin Pass to the main town road. I just wish there was one big point-to-point race where you go from the Wheelwell Motel to the desert in Ornament Valley, but oh well, it just wasn't meant to be. I think it's also interesting to point out that on the PS2 version, point-to-point races 1, 3, and 4 don't exist, since Telfin Pass, Radiator Springs, and Ornament Valley are all separate maps in that version. Next are the relay races. Mana National introduced races where you have a new character to play as every lap, and it returns in this game. Back then, I thought it was pretty cool since it gave you an excuse to play as other characters who aren't Lightning. And while I still do agree with that a little bit, I like the relay races less than I did previously because Lightning is the best controlling character in this game, and I like to just play as him the entire time. Next up are the photo ops. These are pretty simple. Find a massive ring in the overworld, jump through it, and pose for the camera. There isn't much to it. Monster Truck Mayhem is an interesting one. Monster trucks have always been kinda cool before since, you're playing as a giant truck. And credit where it's due, these races are more fun than the waypoint races in Mana National. However, I still don't really care for the monster truck races in this game because they don't control that great. They just have too much weight and feel weird, and I'd rather just play as Lightning normally. The transporter events are pretty basic, just like the photo ops. You have an item, bring it to whoever you need to within the time limit. The autocross events, however, are actually pretty interesting. You have an obstacle course you need to get through as quickly as possible, but you can't hit the wall or the cones due to a time penalty. You also can't jump. It's kinda challenging to get a gold in these events sometimes, and it's always some nice fun. Luigi's Tire Find is basically the same thing as Luigi Did the Rescue in the first Cars game. There are tires scattered around Radiator Springs, go find them. However, I don't like this version as much because there isn't any map telling you where they are. I know that sounds crazy since the entire point is to find them, but I preferred how the challenge used to be grabbing all of them and coming back within the time limit. Now I'm looking for tiny tires all over the place with no hints, and I have the entirety of Carburetor Canyon to search through, not just Radiator Springs. Sheriff's Chase is also the exact same as Sheriff's Hot Pursuit in the first Cars game. There are no differences, at least in gameplay. Tractor Stampede is the same as Tractor Tipping in Cars 1 and International, but now it's in the open world and Frank isn't chasing you. Honestly, I just prefer Tractor Tipping. It's more fun to figure out how to get to the tractors while avoiding Frank, instead of just looking for them and then tipping them over. There are 3 events based on the Mater's Tall Tale shorts, and unlike that game, these ones are actually pretty fun. First is Mater the Greater. You have to get as much speed as possible on this ramp, which is pretty easily since you accelerate automatically. Then you do some QTEs in the air, and then you have to control your landing to get your score multiplier. Tokyo Mater is my favorite of the 3. It's a normal race against Kabuto, but you have to keep on drifting to get the score requirement for the gold. El Matador is the last one, and it's my least favorite. It's just a bunch of QTEs to avoid the bulldozers. And to save the worst minigame for last, Guido Kart. It's a bad Mario Kart clone where you play as Guido racing against forklifts and pity cars. You have some items like smoke screens and refilling your boost. And side note, the smoke screen item does nothing. You're clogging up the view of the CPUs and the computers, they have no view. Now, that, on its own, would just make this minigame kinda boring, but Guido's controls are the main culprit. It's just awful. Softly bump into the wall or another car, spin out. Land in a weird way, spin out. Just turn weirdly, spin out. I had heard all the horror stories about this mode, so I was thinking to myself, okay, I'll do a few Guido Kart races just to get the footage. Turns out I couldn't even do that. I only did the first 2 because it was that bad, and this means it's the only minigame that I didn't fully complete. But overall, I think the optional events are just fine. I don't think they're as good as the optional event in Cars 1, but they're equal to and sometimes better than the ones in International. The only exception is Guido Kart, which is probably the worst game mode in this entire series. But once you're done with Radiator Springs, you go to Santa Carbureira. This is Candace's hometown, and it's a pretty cool place. It's the first beach in the entire series, predating Fireball Beach by 8 years. However, it's still pretty unique, as you have an entire town right next to the beach. This is also where you see the first of Lightning's modified looks. For every new area in the game, Lightning gets some modifications to perform in the new areas. Personally, I like all these designs. They also change Lightning's stats in some minuscule but noticeable ways. You do 2 gold events here, and then you have your final race with Candace. There isn't much to her, she is your standard spoiled rich girl. It's also pretty funny how, according to Doc, right before the race, she's supposed to slow me down chucking dirt into my face. If only that were true. Next up is Autovia. It's an old western town where Lightning does some off-road racing, pretty similar to Radiator Springs. Unlike Radiator Springs though, the town is pretty much abandoned, and it looks a lot older than Radiator Springs. And Autovia, apart from Radiator Springs, all of the races are off-road instead of a few street races.
Hey, Editing Zemshe here again. One thing I forgot to mention is this awful visual bug that that basically happened everywhere in the game. Like, you notice the sun is blinding me? Yeah, that's not a normal thing that happens in the game, I don't think. It's some sort of emulation bug with Xenia. I have no clue how it happened, and I don't really know how to fix it other than keep on closing and reopening Xenia. But yeah, anyway, that's just... If you're curious what that was, Xenia's doing something, I don't know.
However, there is one building that isn't abandoned. Motor Corporation is a factory that Chick sends his students to, and there they are stripped of their humanity and individuality, and they are known as VINs. Cars that are basically robots who calculate the optimal way to win a race, named after the only thing you can differentiate them by, their ID numbers. Again, Chick has entered a full supervillain mode in this game, and it's fantastic. Lightning again gets a new design for this area, and it looks pretty nice. I personally prefer the off-road design he has in Radiant Springs 500.5, but this looks nice as well. The rival in this area is El Machismo, and he's just your typical off-road racer who also happens to work with Chick. The final new area is Motoropolis, and this one is my favorite. You're street racing at night against all these VINs and muscle cars, and you gotta quickly weave your way through all these buildings and side passages for shortcuts. There's also probably the biggest jump you can get in this game, and it's great. Your rival here is Stinger, an orange muscle car who's a strong silent type. He doesn't speak at all, just communicates via engine revs. Even when Chick scolds him for losing to Lightning, he literally just drives off instead of speaking. Just like his area, he's my favorite of the 3 new races in this game. After you do everything in Radiant Springs and you beat Chick's 3 friends, you go back to the Radiant Springs Stadium to finally beat Chick. You compete in 2 races, a rematch against Candace, El Machismo, and Stinger, and another race where you go up against VINs. The final race is a race against Chick, where both of them have modified themselves for peak performance. This also ties into the gameplay, as I'm pretty sure Ultimate Lightning and Ultimate Chick have the best stats in this game. Hell, Lightning goes so fast, he breaks his top speed. Cars 3 states that Lightning's top speed is about 198 miles per hour, and yet Ultimate Lightning can reach somewhere between 200 and 210 miles per hour. After the race, Chick comes to yell at Lightning on the podium, and Lightning says that he might have better luck winning if he had a team behind him, just as Lightning does now. Chick just drives away and says he'll have his revenge. His friends, meanwhile, have some better sportsmanship, saying that they apologize for their behavior and want to start fresh, to which Lightning accepts. And the game ends. We aren't entirely done yet though, as we still have the PSP and DS versions to go through. And, well, the 2 were identical. It's literally the exact same game, only with the differences you'd expect between a PSP and DS game. I mainly played the DS version since I don't think I set PPS as PP up properly. You can tell with the vertical purple lines on the screen. The DS version of Race-O-Rama is a perfectly fine game. It's just a watered down port of the main Race-O-Rama game, with the exact same story, locations, characters, all of that. The track design is naturally different, and the structure of the game is different, with you just having a main menu and going back and forth between locations that are just doing a batch. Every 4 races you have a rival race, ending with a final race against Chick. This version also has a unique mechanic in the wrenches and upgrades. There are 6 wrenches in each track, and they allow you to buy upgrades. A bumper to get through obstacles, a horn to tip tractors, inflatable tires to go across water, and magnetic tires to drive on the ceiling. I didn't use the upgrades much since they were so expensive, and you need to fill up this gauge to use them. It's kinda hard to fill up this gauge though, so you probably won't use your upgrades until the end of the 3rd lap. Overall, the DS and PSP versions of this game are fine, but I'll always play the console version over these versions. So, with all this done, where does Race-O-Rama place compared to the other Cars games? Is it better than Cars 1? Personally, yeah. Cars 1 is more consistently good, and is probably the better game objectively. Race-O-Rama, meanwhile, has some parts I don't care for, and some parts I downright hate. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't having more fun with this game than I did with Cars 1. The lows are higher than Cars 1, but the highs are higher. Unlike Main and National, where the lows were lower and the highs never reached Cars 1's level. Now then, is it the best Cars game? No, that honor still goes to Cars 2. I think the only thing Cars 1 and Race-O-Rama have over that game is the story. Now then, I'm done reviewing Race-O-Rama, but since this will probably be my last Cars video, at least for a while, I wanted to spend a little time talking about all these games together and how they compare to each other. For that, I've made this tier list. Maynard's Tall Tales is the worst Cars game, period. It's a simple and boring game that has nothing going for it beyond 1 or 2 minigames. Fast as Lightning is definitely fun, but it's a deprecated and delisted mobile game, and the core gameplay loop gets stale after only a few minutes. It's cool how many characters there are, some set pieces are incredibly cool, and nice how some characters who've never been playable before or since are here, but this game is more of a novelty than anything really special. Driven to Win is basically just Cars 2 again, but with hardly any of the personality or style. It has more tracks, but it has fewer modes, fewer characters, and I hate the progression with skill checks. I will always just prefer doing races or some variant over mindlessly ticking away boxes by doing random and mundane tasks. Main and National is just Cars 1, but worse in every respect. The overworld is miles worse, the story is worse, it's just not good. Cars 1 is pretty good for the same reasons all of us know. The story is pretty good, the track design is great, the overworld is fun to explore, the minigames are the best in the series, and it's just good. I just spent the past few minutes talking about why Race-O-Rama is good. Lightning feels the best to play as in this one. There are interesting new locations, the new characters are pretty cool, and customizing Lightning is interesting and novel. Cars 2 is the best in this franchise. The track design is great, the character roster is unmatched and only got better with the DLC. It's the best looking game in the entire series, it's got the best game modes, and it's got the most fun achievements. But, with all this being said and done, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.